I was 53 when everything I had built collapsed in the space between a sneeze and an ambulance siren. It started with the chicken salad. I remember the exact shade of green in the parsley, the way the stainless steel counters gleamed under the kitchen lights at Bennett and Bloom Catering, the business I had poured 27 years into. I remember thinking, absurdly, that the fridge felt warmer than usual. I remember telling myself not to worry. I remember being tired. By midnight, 3 wedding guests were in the ER. By morning, the health department was at my door. By noon, my phone was a chorus of lawsuits, cancellations, and a single voicemail from my husband that ended our marriage with one sentence. "You've ruined our lives, Harper." He didn't even say my name kindly. The fallout came fast and ruthless. The investigation found contamination traced back to my kitchen. Negligence, they said. My insurance wouldn't cover gross negligence. The brand I had nurtured since my 20s, my recipes, my reputation, my life, was reduced to a headline and a warning label. I closed the doors a week later. I sold the van. I sold the mixers. I sold my grandmother's china to pay one of the lawyers. Gavin packed his clothes into 2 suitcases and left the house without looking back. When I told him our daughter, Lily, was wheezing again, he said he needed space. He said he couldn't breathe in a house full of failure. I stayed. I always stayed. 2 weeks after the doors shut, the bank took the house. 3 days after that, Lily's inhaler ran out. I was standing in a strip mall on Route 9 when I realized I had exactly $12 to my name. The pharmacy wanted 52 for the refill. I asked if they could hold it. The tech looked at me with practiced sympathy and shook her head. I sat in my car and cried until my throat burned. That's when I noticed the sign next door. Plasma Donation Center. New donors welcome. $40 same day. I stared at the number like it was a miracle written in block letters. $40 would buy the inhaler. It would buy me a little time. It would buy my daughter breath. I wiped my face, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, gray threading my hair, eyes too tired for my age, and walked inside. The center smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. The chairs were vinyl, the kind that stuck to your skin. A television mounted in the corner played a daytime talk show with the volume off. People sat hunched over their phones, sleeves rolled up, lives paused for cash. At the front desk, a woman with kind eyes slid a clipboard toward me. "First time?" I nodded. "Fill this out. Any history of fainting?" "No," I said, which was true. I had fainted emotionally plenty, but my body had always been stubborn. They weighed me, took my blood pressure, pricked my finger. I passed every box with quiet relief. When the nurse called my name, I followed her down a narrow hallway lined with posters about hydration and protein. Her name tag said Maria. "Any issues with needles?" she asked, snapping on gloves. "No," I said again. "I just need to get this done quickly." She smiled. "We'll take good care of you." The needle went in smoothly. I turned my head away and focused on the rhythmic hum of the machine. I thought about Lily's chest rising and falling at night, the soft whistle that always made me sit up straighter. I thought about how strange it was that my blood, this ordinary thing I'd never given a second thought, was suddenly currency. Maria frowned at the monitor. "That's odd," she murmured, my stomach tight. "What?" "Your blood type," she said. "Did you ever know it?" "Oh, positive," I said automatically. That's what my mother had told me years ago. She glanced at me, then back at the screen. "I'm going to pause this for a moment." She left without another word. Lay there staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the cracks. 10 minutes passed. 15 people around me finished and left. The talk show cycled to commercials. My arm tingled. When Maria returned, she wasn't alone. A man in a lab coat followed her, his expression careful in the way doctors get when they're about to change your life. "Ms. Bennett," he said, "I'm Dr. Cole. We're going to run a second test." "Why?" My voice sounded too loud in the quiet room. "There's been a discrepancy," he said gently. They drew more blood, they whispered over printouts, they made a phone call. An hour later, I was escorted into a private office I hadn't known existed. Dr. Cole closed the door behind us. "Harper," he said, using my first name like an anchor. "Have you ever heard of Rh null?" I shook my head. "It's sometimes called golden blood," he said. "It's the rarest blood type in the world." I laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking," he said. "There are fewer than 50 known cases worldwide." My hands went cold. "So what does that mean?" "It means your blood can be transfused to anyone with rare Rh deficiencies," he said, "and more importantly, only Rh null blood can be used for someone with Rh null." I stared at him. "So what? I'm a unicorn?" His mouth twitched. "Something like that." My phone buzzed, a text from Lily's school nurse. "Lily's breathing is tight, please call." "I need to go," I said, standing too fast. "I just came for $40. You'll still receive the donation compensation," Dr. Cole said quickly, "but there's something else." He hesitated, then slid a business card across the desk. It was thick, embossed. The name on it meant nothing to me. "Someone has been notified," he said. "They may wish to speak with you." "Who?" I asked. "A medical representative," he said carefully. "From Switzerland." I laughed again, louder this time. "I don't know anyone in Switzerland." "You do now?" he said. I left with $40 in my purse and a knot in my chest that wouldn't loosen. I picked up Lily, filled her prescription, watched her breathe easier by evening. I told myself the rest was a mistake, a fluke, a story that would fizzle out by morning. It didn't. At 6:12 a.m., my phone rang. The number was international. I let it ring twice before answering. Harper Bennett? A man asked, his accent crisp, precise. Yes, I said, heart pounding. My name is Thomas Keller, he said. I represent a client who has been informed of your unique medical compatibility. I sat up in bed, the motel sheets rough against my skin. I don't understand. You will, he said. My client is Alexander Richter. The name still meant nothing to me then. He is scheduled for critical cardiac surgery in Zurich, Thomas continued. He requires Rh null blood. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. I'm not a blood bank. No, he agreed. You are a person, one who could save his life. And if I say no, I asked. There was a pause, not a threat, a calculation. Then we thank you for your time, he said, and we continue to hope. And if I say yes, we fly you to Switzerland, he said. Private, we cover all expenses, we compensate you generously. How generously? I asked, thinking of motel bills and inhalers and the way my daughter's eyes tracked my worry. Another pause. 7 figures, he said. The room tilted. I need time, I whispered. Of course, he said, but not much. His condition is deteriorating. I hung up and pressed my palms to my face. I thought of Gavin's parting shot, of my empty kitchen, of my blood suddenly precious. By noon, another call came, then an email, then a knock on the motel door. Thomas Keller stood in the hallway, impeccably dressed, holding a leather folder. May we talk? He asked. Inside, he laid out contracts and medical clearances and non-disclosure agreements. He spoke calmly, respectfully, as if this were any other transaction. I signed with shaking hands. By evening, Lily and I were at the airport. A private jet gleamed on the tarmac, absurd and real. As we climbed the stairs, my phone buzzed. Gavin. I stared at his name until it stopped buzzing. Then it buzzed again. I answered. I heard you came into some money, he said without preamble. I closed my eyes. The jet engines hummed to life. Everything was changing. And I had no idea who I was becoming. The jet lifted off with a smoothness that felt unreal, like the world below had simply decided to let us go. I pressed my forehead to the oval window as the city shrank into a grid of lights. Lily slept curled against me, her breath steady, one small hand fisted in my sweater like she was afraid I might disappear. I kept my arm tight around her, afraid that if I loosened my grip, this entire moment would evaporate. I had not told her the truth. Not yet. I had said we were going on a trip. I had said Mommy had a job. I had said everything would be okay in a voice that sounded stronger than I felt. Across the aisle, Thomas Keller sat with a tablet already working. He hadn't asked many questions. He hadn't offered comfort. He had offered certainty, which somehow felt more dangerous. A flight attendant appeared with a tray of food that looked like it belonged in a magazine. I shook my head. My stomach was a tight knot of fear and adrenaline. You should eat, Thomas said without looking up. You'll need your strength. For what? I asked. He finally met my eyes. For everything. The flight lasted 10 hours. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I excused myself to the tiny bathroom and stared at my reflection. The fluorescent light was unforgiving. I looked like a woman who had lost everything, because I was. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, there was something else now, a spark, a quiet, dangerous hope. When we landed in Zurich, the air felt sharper, cleaner. A sleek black car waited on the runway. Another contract was signed, another reassurance given. Lily was ushered into a car seat with practiced efficiency. As we drove, the city unfolded like a postcard, glass buildings, old stone bridges, water so blue it didn't look real. I felt like an imposter moving through a world that hadn't been built for women like me. The hotel suite overlooked the lake. It was larger than the first apartment Gavin and I had shared, back when dreams were cheap and love felt permanent. Lily ran from room to room, laughing, her voice echoing. I watched her and felt something crack open in my chest. This was why I was here. That night, after Lily fell asleep in the plush bed that swallowed her whole, there was a knock at the door. Thomas stepped aside to reveal a woman in a white coat. Ms. Bennett, she said, extending her hand. I'm Dr. Elise Vogel. I'll be overseeing your care. My care? I asked. She smiled. You are far too valuable to be treated casually. The word valuable landed hard. She explained the process, blood draws, strict schedules, constant monitoring. She explained the risks, minimal but real. She explained that I could stop at any time. What about him? I asked. Alexander Richter. He would like to meet you, she said. If you are willing, I hesitated. Why? Because, she said carefully, he believes gratitude should be personal. The next morning I was escorted through a private hospital wing that smelled faintly of lavender instead of antiseptic. The walls were lined with art, not charts. Money, I realized, didn't just buy comfort, it bought a different reality. They led me into a sunlit room overlooking the lake. Alexander Richter stood by the window. He turned when he heard the door close. He was taller than I expected, his hair silver at the temples, his posture precise but strained. His eyes, gray, sharp, studied me with an intensity that made me want to look away. Instead, I lifted my chin. You're Harper Bennett, he said, his voice calm but threaded with something raw. Yes, I said, and you're alive. A faint smile touched his mouth. For now. Silence stretched between us, heavy and intimate. I owe you my life, he said finally. You don't, I replied. Not yet. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe respect. Sit, he said, gesturing to a chair. Please. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing and everything, about Lily, about my catering business, about the irony of blood being both invisible and priceless. You were willing to walk away, he said softly, more statement than question. I still am, I said, if I feel unsafe, if my daughter does. Good, he said, then we understand each other. The first donation took place 2 days later. I lay in a bed that felt more like a spa than a hospital room. Nurses moved quietly, efficiently. Alexander wasn't there, but I felt his presence like a hum in the air. As the blood left my body, I felt oddly calm, like I was finally doing something that mattered in a way no one could take from me. Afterward, I slept for hours. When I woke, my phone was filled with missed calls. Gavin. Voicemails stacked like accusations. You think you're better than me now? I know what this is, I deserve my share. You owe me, Harper. I deleted them one by one. The money hit my account that evening. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. I paid off debts. I secured Lily's future. I booked an apartment near the hospital instead of the hotel, craving something that felt more real. And still, unease followed me. Because money changes the way people look at you, including the people who once walked away. A week into our stay, Gavin showed up in Zurich. I saw him first in the reflection of a cafe window, his familiar slouch, his anger barely disguised as charm. My heart slammed against my ribs. Harper, he said, sliding into the seat across from me without asking. There you are. I didn't answer. You look good, he continued. Rested. What do you want? I asked. He smiled, the same smile that had once convinced me love was enough. To talk. You left, I said. You don't get to talk. Things were complicated, he said quickly. We were under pressure. I laughed, short and sharp. I was under pressure, you abandoned us. His eyes hardened. You wouldn't be here without me. That was the moment something inside me finally snapped into place. You're wrong, I said quietly. I'm here because of me. He leaned back, studying me like a puzzle that no longer fit. We should renegotiate. There is nothing to negotiate, I said. Lily and I are done. His jaw tightened. You'll regret this. As he stood to leave, my phone buzzed. A message from Thomas. Alexander has taken a turn. Surgery moved up. We need you tonight. I rose, heart racing. Gavin grabbed my arm. You're not going anywhere until we finish this. I pulled free, my voice steady. Don't touch me again. I walked away without looking back. That night, as I lay connected to machines, I felt fear for the first time since arriving. Real fear. Not of poverty or loss, but of how deeply intertwined my life had become with another's survival. When the doctor told me the transfusion had gone well, I cried with relief I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Alexander survived the surgery. When I saw him days later, pale but alive, something unspoken passed between us. You stayed, he said. So did you, I replied. Outside, snow began to fall over the lake, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to wonder what came next. The snow kept falling for 3 days straight, softening the edges of the city, until Zurich looked like a place that belonged to someone else's life. Mine had always been louder, messier, full of grease stains and raised voices and the clatter of pans. Here, even the sirens sounded polite. Alexander recovered faster than anyone expected. Or maybe that was the privilege talking, private rooms, round-the-clock specialists, a body that had never been denied rest. Still, I watched him closely when I visited, cataloging the subtle changes. The way his color improved, the steadiness returning to his hands, the sharpness in his eyes sharpening further like a blade being honed. I was there because of blood. That knowledge never left me. On the 4th day after surgery, Thomas called me into a conference room overlooking the lake. Lily was at school? Yes, school, a temporary international program that cost more per week than my first apartment did per month. Loved it? That alone kept me steady. Thomas folded his hands on the table. Alexander would like to extend your arrangement. I didn't sit, define extend. Additional donations, he said, at safe intervals, continued compensation, long-term security. And when I'm no longer useful? I asked. He didn't flinch. You will always be useful, Ms. Bennett, but you will never be obligated. I stared out the window. The lake was impossibly calm. I want guarantees. Name them. Daughter stays with me, full medical coverage, education, no publicity, no pressure. Thomas nodded, all reasonable. And my ex-husband, I added, my voice tightening. He stays away. Thomas paused. Alexander anticipated that. A document slid across the table, restraining orders, legal firepower so dense it made my head spin. I signed. When I told Alexander that evening, he listened without interruption. You are protecting your child, he said simply. As you should. And you. I asked, what are you protecting? He smiled faintly. What remains of my life? Weeks passed. Donations became routine, though nothing about them felt ordinary. I learned the rhythm of my body in new ways, the fatigue that crept in, the metallic taste that lingered, the strange intimacy of knowing my blood was flowing through someone else's veins. Alexander and I talked often about books, about regret, about what it meant to start over when most people assumed your story was already written. You don't act like someone who's been rescued, he said once. I wasn't, I replied. I was discovered. He studied me for a long moment. There is a difference. Gavin didn't disappear quietly. He sent emails, then letters, then threats disguised as apologies. Each one bounced off the legal wall Alexander had erected around us. Still, his presence lingered like a bad smell, a reminder of who I used to be. One afternoon, I came home to find Lily sitting on the couch, her face pale. Mom, she said, Dad called. My heart dropped. What did he say? That you're sick, she whispered. That you're lying to me. I knelt in front of her, taking her hands. I'm not sick, I'm helping someone, and I would never lie to you about something that mattered. She searched my face, then nodded. Okay. That night, I cried alone in the bathroom, the weight of everything pressing down on me at once. The final donation came sooner than expected. Alexander's condition stabilized fully. Doctors declared the crisis over. You've given me more than blood, he told me the day I was cleared to leave. You've reminded me what survival costs. And what does it cost? I asked. Everything, he said, if you let it. We stood by the window, the lake no longer frozen, spring threatening at its edges. Will you go back, he asked, to your old life? I thought of the empty kitchen, the closed doors, the woman I had been before everything fell apart. No, I said, I'll build something new. He nodded. So will I. When Lily and I boarded the plane home, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because of the money, though it had solved many problems, but because I finally understood my worth had never been tied to my success, my marriage, or my failures. It had been inside me all along, waiting to be seen. As the plane lifted off, Lily squeezed my hand. What happens next, Mom? She asked. I smiled, looking out at the horizon. Anything we want. When we landed back in the States, the air felt heavier, thicker, like it carried memory. I had arranged a temporary apartment outside Boston, nothing extravagant, just light-filled, clean, safe. Lily ran through it on the first day, claiming corners, choosing which window would be hers. I watched her like a miracle I'd almost lost, my chest tight with gratitude and fear in equal measure. The money sat quietly in accounts I checked too often, like it might vanish if I didn't keep an eye on it. I hired a financial advisor. I hired a lawyer. I learned a new language made of trust funds and clauses and contingencies. I learned how quickly people return when they smell stability. Old colleagues emailed condolences mixed with curiosity. Distant relatives asked how I was really doing. A local reporter left a voicemail hinting at a human interest piece about resilience after scandal. I didn't call back. I wanted a life without spectacle. 2 weeks after we returned, Lily had an asthma flare at school. Not a bad one, manageable, but the old panic hit me like a punch. I arrived before the nurse finished dialing. Lily looked at me, embarrassed more than afraid. I'm okay, Mom, she said. I just needed the inhaler. I hugged her too tightly. She didn't complain. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at a blank notebook. I hadn't cooked professionally since the incident. I hadn't even enjoyed cooking. Food had felt like an accusation. Still, my hands itched. I started small: soup, bread, the simple things that don't hide mistakes. The smell filled the apartment, grounding me. I tasted, adjusted, tasted again. When I finally sat down to eat, I cried, not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. A month later, I rented a modest commercial kitchen space 3 days a week. No signage, no branding, just me and ingredients and time. I cooked meals for a women's shelter nearby, quietly, anonymously. It felt right. It felt like penance and permission all at once. Alexander called once a week, sometimes more. We didn't talk about blood anymore. We talked about music, about the strange loneliness of wealth, about starting over when the world insists you've peaked. You don't need me anymore, I said once, half joking. He paused. I never needed you the way you think. What way is that? As a resource, he said. I needed you as a reminder. Of what? That life is not transactional unless you make it so. His words stayed with me. Gavin tried one last time. He showed up outside Lily's school, waiting by his car like he owned the place. I saw him before Lily did. I walked straight toward him, heart hammering but steps steady. You can't be here, I said. She's my daughter, he snapped. She's my responsibility, I replied. And you lost the right to ambush her. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not poorer, just diminished. You think you're untouchable now, he said bitterly. No, I said. I think I'm done. I turned away. This time he didn't follow. Spring settled in. Lily's breathing improved. She laughed more easily. She stopped asking if we'd have to move again. Stability, I learned, is a medicine all its own. One afternoon, a letter arrived with Swiss postage. Inside was a simple note in Alexander's precise handwriting. I'm opening a foundation focused on rare blood research and donor protection. I would like you to be involved, not as a donor, but as a voice. Consider it. I did. We met in New York weeks later in a quiet conference room overlooking the river. He looked healthier, grounded in a way that had nothing to do with medicine. You don't owe me this, I said. I know, he replied. That's why I want you. We built something careful and ethical and human, policies shaped by lived experience, safeguards. Dignity, I spoke to boards and doctors and lawmakers, my voice steady, my story controlled by me. I didn't hide what happened to my business, I didn't soften the truth. Accountability, I learned, doesn't mean erasure. On my 54th birthday, Lily baked me a cake. It was lopsided and over-sugared and perfect. Make a wish, she said. I closed my eyes. I wished for breath, for time, for the courage to keep choosing myself. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from Alexander, proud of you. I smiled, set the phone down, and looked around my kitchen. My new kitchen, smaller, quieter, mine. I had lost everything external and found something priceless, myself. I didn't expect peace to feel so ordinary. That was the strange part of it, the way it crept in quietly, without announcement, without fireworks. One day I was simply standing at the sink, rinsing a mug, sunlight warming the back of my hands, and I realized my shoulders weren't hunched. My jaw wasn't clenched. My mind wasn't racing 3 disasters ahead. I was just there. It had been almost a year since the plasma center. A year since $40 had cracked my life open and shown me what I'd been bleeding long before anyone ever took a needle to my arm. Lily was 12 now, taller, steadier, her asthma controlled so well that weeks passed without me checking her breathing in the middle of the night. She had friends. She had opinions. She had started correcting my grammar with infuriating confidence. Mom, she said one evening, leaning against the counter while I cooked, you know you don't have to prove anything anymore, right? I looked at her. Prove what? That you're okay, she said. You already are. Children see things adults miss, or maybe they see them because they don't look away. The foundation work had grown slowly, deliberately. No headlines, no hero narratives. Just systems put in place so people with rare blood types weren't treated like commodities or curiosities. I insisted on donor consent protocols that couldn't be rushed. Counseling, independent advocates, exit plans. Alexander listened, always. You're changing how medicine treats scarcity, one physician told me after a panel discussion. No, I corrected gently. I'm changing how it treats people. I never donated again after that last time. The doctors said I could, safely, if I wanted. I didn't. What I gave instead was harder and I think more valuable. My voice, my boundaries, my refusal to let desperation be exploited. I still cooked. The kitchen space turned into something unexpected, a hybrid between a test kitchen and a teaching space. I ran small workshops for women restarting after loss, divorce, bankruptcy, illness, no cameras, no branding. Just aprons and knives and stories traded between chopping onions and kneading dough. One afternoon, a woman my age stayed behind after class. Her hands shook when she spoke. I thought my life was over, she said, but you don't act like it is. I smiled at her, recognizing the fear in her eyes. It isn't, I said. It just stopped looking the way you expected. Gavin faded into background noise. The restraining order expired. I didn't renew it. He didn't try again. I heard through Lily's grandparents that he'd moved, changed jobs, started over in his own quiet, stubborn way. I didn't wish him harm. I didn't wish him back. That to me was progress. Alexander and I never labeled what we were. We didn't need to. There was affection, respect, something deep and unhurried that had nothing to prove. Sometimes weeks passed without contact. Sometimes we spoke 3 nights in a row about nothing at all. When he visited Boston, he stayed at a hotel. When he came over for dinner, he washed dishes without being asked. Once, as we stood side by side at the sink, he said, "You know, there was a time when I believed survival was the same as winning." "And now?" I asked. "Now I think survival is choosing what you carry forward," he said, "and what you put down." I thought of my old business, my marriage, the shame I'd worn like a second skin. "I put down guilt," I said quietly. He nodded. "Good choice." On the anniversary of the incident, the one I no longer referred to as the catastrophe, I took the day off. Lily was at school. The kitchen was closed. I drove to the ocean and walked the shoreline alone. The wind was sharp, the water relentless. I let myself remember everything. The fear, the anger, the humiliation. I didn't soften it. I didn't rewrite it. Then I let it go. Not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer owned me. That night, Lily and I ate takeout on the couch, laughing at something ridiculous on television. Halfway through, she leaned her head on my shoulder. "You're different now," she said. "Better or worse?" I asked. "Stronger," she said, "but softer too." I kissed the top of her head, emotion catching in my throat. Later, after she went to bed, I stepped out onto the small balcony. The city hummed below, alive and imperfect. My phone buzzed with a message from Alexander, just a photo of a sunrise over the Alps. No caption, I didn't need one. I thought about the woman I had been walking into that plasma center, how small she'd felt, how invisible, how convinced she was that her worth had already expired. She had been wrong. Worth isn't measured in success or youth or how well you hold things together. It's measured in what remains when everything else is stripped away. I had lost a business, a marriage, a home. What I found instead was breath, choice, agency. A future I hadn't been brave enough to imagine before. At 53, my life hadn't ended. It had finally begun. And this time, I was living it on my own terms.